Okay, today we're going to look at the structure of leaves. So what you're seeing in the corner is an example of what's called a tendril. A tendril is a specialized leaf found in vines. And the reason for this, obviously, maybe not obviously, is that vines are plants that are climbers. And they have a tendency to climb on things that they can touch, obviously. So you can see how that the first tendril kind of goes around in a 360-degree rotation. Once it finds that stick to grab onto, then it coils itself around the stick. That ends up supporting the vine as it climbs, because I'm sure we've all seen vines in real life. And the stems are very herbaceous, meaning the stems are very flexible, very green. So the stems will have a lot of parenchyma cells to bring it back to the specialized cells that we've looked at before. In some species, the tendril is actually a specialized stem. An example of this kind of plant is in grapes. Another adaptation of a specialized leaf is you see here in the Venus flytrap on the right-hand side, and on the left-hand side, we have what's called the pitcher plant. I do believe you have those here in Thailand. The Venus flytraps, I think, grow in Indonesia. I'm not really sure. But these two are adapted for being carnivorous, which means they feed on animals. And you might think, what kind of plant feeds on animals? Well, the reason why they adapted to be carnivorous is because they grow in very nutrient poor soil. So they supplement their diets by feeding on animals. So the leaves in this example function as food traps. Now for the pitcher plant, couple of adaptations. First is in the lid of the cup, I guess, or the pitcher. It usually has kind of like a nectar type fluid on it. And the sides inside are very slippery. So the insects are generally attracted to the sweetness of the nectar on I'll just call it the lid. I don't know what else to call it. And so as they're walking along the ledge, they sometimes fall in. Now, because the sides are very slippery, they can't climb up. And inside here is a liquid filled with digestive enzymes. So the animal probably drowns first and then gets slowly digested over time. For the Venus flytrap, inside I don't know what to call it, the mouth, I guess, I don't know, inside here, there's tiny little hairs, maybe like a dozen or so hairs. And it's not like if you were to just touch it, it snaps shut like this, but it's actually a reaction after several of the hairs are triggered that it closes, trapping the animal inside. Once the leaves close on itself, then that's when the plant releases digestive enzymes. And again, will slowly digest the animal. Oh, is that this one? Yeah, this one. So this is the pitcher plant.
The trap.
What you're going to see is a time-lapse video of how the actual pitcher develops. And it's actually really cool because, well, you'll see it kind of, the tip grows out and then it starts to curve downward. And then once it hits the ground, that's when it actually starts to form the pitcher part of it.
Of this Asian family of pitcher plants are once again modified leaves. But they're not simply folded into a tube. The process is more complex. A shoot appears that looks just the same as those that turn into normal leaves.
So it's important to understand that for the pitcher plant, not only does it have these specialized leaves, but it also has normal leaves for photosynthesis as well.
Over a period of several days, flanges develop near the end and open out to form the blade of a leaf.
So this is what can do the photosynthesis.
But then the tip of the midrib continues to grow.
That's when it starts to point downwards.
Once it touches the ground, it begins to inflate.
So this is the pitcher starting to form. Again, just to point out, this is real video. It's just called time lapse. It's done over a long period of time. There is going to be a small a small sound effect that's added as soon as the lid pops up. It's going to sound like a hollow kind of sound. The plant does not make that sound. That's been added, but all the video is real. That sound. The plant does not make that sound when it opens.
To expose the plant's lethal pond. Some of the bigger species may produce half a dozen or so of these huge, elegant traps.
Okay. So even though it has normal leaves, you saw that the tip of the leaf keeps extending to form the pitcher. Now the leaves are still responsible for photosynthesis, which is the construction of organic compounds from carbon dioxide and water using sunlight. But the plant still needs nutrients. It still needs nitrates. It still needs phosphorus and other nutrients like that. So when you have plants that grow in nutrient poor soil, that doesn't mean they can't make the food, they just need nutrients. So then that's why they end up having these adaptations.
They snap, they trap, they stick, and they suck. This is the bizarre world of carnivorous plants, leafy creatures that eat everything from insects to crustaceans to mammals. I'm Anna, and this is Gross Science. The vast majority of plants only require a few things to survive: sunlight, water, air, and mineral nutrients, which they typically get from the soil or pond water they're growing in. These nutrients are elements like nitrogen and phosphorus, which are building blocks for making things like DNA and proteins. But most carnivorous plants live in places without a lot of nutrients, like peat bogs. So to really thrive, they draw extra nutrition from the bodies of unsuspecting prey. Now, carnivory has actually evolved multiple times in plants all over the world, giving rise to some wildly diverse and morbidly beautiful methods for catching food. So Vanessa from Braincraft and I bought a few carnivorous plants.
They're so beautiful.
They really are.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna show you some of my favorites. You ready, Vanessa?
I'm scared and kind of excited all at once.
Me too. Okay, so first, this is the Bladderwort. These guys live in watery environments, but they have these small, empty chambers growing from their stems. When a tiny creature, like a crustacean, passes by, it brushes against these things called trigger hairs. The hairs make the door to the chamber pop open, and as water rushes in to fill the empty space inside, the tiny crustacean gets sucked in too. This entire process happens in less than 1,000th of a second. The video you're watching here has been slowed way down. Then the bladderwort releases digestive enzymes into the chamber to break down the insect's body and lap up its nutrients. After its meal, the chamber squeezes out all the water, closes the door, and is ready to catch more prey. Wow. But that's only one variety of carnivorous plant. Other types of carnivorous plants act totally differently. For example, the leaves of sundews are covered in delicate, wispy hairs, each with a teeny drop of liquid at the end. Thinking the liquid is actually delicious nectar, insects fly in to grab a tasty drink. But those dewdrops are actually sticky and trap the bug. The wispy tentacles curl around the insect, holding it tightly and maximizing the number of hairs it touches, which speeds up digestion.
What I find so cool is the way that sundews operate is like a botanical version of brains and muscles. So while they don't have any brain cells, they do have chemical signals to move, which kind of acts like a brain.
That's so amazing. It's a really good analogy.
Yeah.
The other really cool thing is that there are some carnivorous plants that actually capture prey without moving at all. So pitcher plants have deep basins filled with digestive enzymes. Insects venture in looking for food, but then they can't get back out. There are tons of different varieties of these plants, but in this species, called Sarracenia flava, the inside of the pitcher is slippery, so bugs fall in and then can't crawl up the walls. They also have these downward pointing hairs at the bottom of the pitcher that make climbing out even more difficult for the insects. And some species of pitcher plant can catch more than just bugs. Certain tropical pitcher plants are so large that they've been known to trap small rodents like mice and rats.
That's scary. It's very scary.
It absolutely is. But next is a type of plant that might be a little bit more familiar.
It is more familiar.
This is the Venus flytrap. These plants have book-like leaves, which emit a sweet smell that attracts insects like flies. When a fly lands on the leaf, it brushes against trigger hairs. Touching the hair sends a little electric charge through the leaf, and each charge stimulates pores to open, which allow water to move from one part of the leaf to another. The changes in water pressure make the book snap shut in under a second. However, the plant will only close if at least 2 hairs are touched in under about 20 seconds, or if the same hair is triggered twice in the same amount of time. Then the struggling prey needs to touch more hairs before the flow of digestive juices begins. This keeps the plant from wasting precious resources on a false alarm, like a floating speck of dirt or a curious human setting off the snare for fun.
So when you're talking about these electrical charges, you're really referring to something called action potentials. And these are signals our own brain's neurons use to pass on information to each other. So we don't tend to think about it, but it's kind of amazing how similar we are to plants.
Yeah, we don't tend to think about it, and that is really amazing.
Yes.
And Vanessa actually has a whole video about this over on her channel, so I will put a link to it somewhere on the screen.
Okay, we don't care. Right, so those are carnivorous plants and how leaves have adapted for predation, really. Now, cacti are a whole other type of adaptation. Obviously, they live in the desert, so they have a high probability of water loss from transpiration. Now, if you don't remember transpiration, I'm gonna draw my plant. I'm just gonna draw one leaf. So transpiration is the loss of water from a plant, and it occurs because on the underside of the leaf, you have the stomata, they got the holes. Remembering all the way back to the beginning where I talked about the most challenging challenge, the most difficult challenge of adapting to life on land is something called desiccation. And that's a fancy word for drying out. But it's not just drying out, it's like death from drying out. You literally die from desiccation. And so for plants, in order to prevent desiccation, they developed a cuticle. It's that waxy layer on the outside of leaves, but a cuticle also prevents carbon dioxide from going in. So that's when they ended up developing stomata, which are these holes. And that's how water is available. Water is able to evaporate through the leaves. Now, because cacti live in the deserts, they're going to reduce the size of their leaf to the spines that we see on cacti. The problem with that is that now you have given up photosynthesis in favor of not losing water. So that's why the body or the stem of the cactus is green, because now the stem or the body of the cactus is going to take over photosynthesis for the leaves. Now we're going to look at leaf structures. Obviously, I just went through several different adaptations of leaves. So we know that leaves come in a variety of shapes and sizes, as we did with the little activity of when you guys went out and compared monocots and dicots. It's really, really important identifying marker for species of plants. In fact, there's apps available. I think I was able to download one because I really like plants. I like having plants in my house, but I tend to let them die, not on purpose, but I don't have what they call a green thumb. I have a brown thumb, like all my plants die. So there's apps available for you to just take a picture of the leaves, and it will be able to identify the species and then therefore let you know how to take care of it. Because I like to buy plants that are pretty and then I don't know what they are. And I don't know if they need lots of sun or no sun or lots of water, a little bit of water. And I end up just like killing them all. So I've bought over the years, I don't know, like dozens of plants. I think I have 2 left that are still living, which I'm pretty amazed at. But yeah, so identifying plants by their leaves is really important. Now, the first major structure is the obvious, what we would just call the leaf. This is actually called the blade. And this is where photosynthesis occurs. Now, the blade is attached to the stem by this section called the, oh, I can't draw black on black, bro. Section called the petiole. So it's kind of like the stem of the leaf, attaching the leaf to the bigger stem, the petiole. Okay, I guess I already had an arrow there. Now, leaves can be either single compound or doubly compound. If coming from the petiole is a single blade, that's called a simple leaf. If coming from the petiole is many leaves, that's called a compound leaf. So each of these is called a leaflet. So I imagine if this is the main stem, you've got your petiole, which is the branch that comes off of the stem. And then you look at the structure of the leaf. Is it leaflets or is it a single blade? So do you think this is a simple or compound leaf?
How to determine?
Okay, thanks for asking. So first you have to determine where the stem is. So that would be the stem, which means that is the petiole, which means this whole thing is compound. Okay, because basically if this was one single leaf, then it would be simple. But based on that, where the arrow is pointing, that's the petiole, that's where the leaf or the blade starts. And you've got all of these little leaflets, that makes it a compound leaf. Oh, okay, I'll get out of the chat. Okay, how about this one? So that's the petiole. Is this a single blade or is it leaflets? Okay, it's leaflets. So that makes it compound also. This one is a little bit harder to see, but you look down at the bottom, this, that right there, what I just circled, that's the petiole. This is the stem, which means there's a single blade attached to the petiole. That's a simple leaf. This one again, You see the stem here. Not really a great picture, but basically you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 leaves coming off of one. So that's compound. This one is a little bit tricky, or maybe not, but this main part right here, that's the stem. That's the petiole. Single blade, simple. Now this one is a trick question because this, oh, that could be the, yeah, that's not a, sorry, not a trick question. This is the stem, which means that's the petiole. And each of these is a leaflet, so it's compound. In some species, we also have leaflets that are divided. This is a doubly compound leaf. So again, first thing you want to identify the main stem that's here, which means this is the petiole. And each of these is a leaflet, but the leaflets have leaflets. So this is a doubly compound leaf. Now, going back to the tissue systems of plants, we have the dermal, ground, and vascular tissue systems. Again, for the roots, which we've done, the stem, and now the leaf, we've got the dermal tissue around the outside here, in the stem, in the leaf, always on the outside. You get the ground tissue in this kind of greenish color up here in the leaf as well. And then finally, vascular tissue. The vascular tissue in the leaf is going to be a little bit different. You've got the main vein going through the middle of the leaf. And of course, you've got the veins, depending on if it's a monocot or dicot. This is obviously a dicot because it's got branched venation and not parallel venation. So the epidermis is a single layer that's coated with the cuticle. Sometimes you have the addition of hairs to help cut down, well, two reasons. One, it can help cut down on the amount of sunlight that the leaf is exposed to so it doesn't burn. But number two, it could also be a deterrent for predators. Because it's covered with a cuticle, water, oxygen, and carbon dioxide have to go in and out through stomata. And these are epidermal hairs. Like I said, protect from predators or herbivores, but also too much light, because it is possible for leaves to burn. The number of stomata in per area on a plant depends on the species. For aquatic plant, which I did a terrible job at trying to cut out the white background of this picture, but never mind. Aquatic plants are going to have little or no stomata. They're probably just going to rely straight on diffusion to go in and out of the leaf. Now, in most plants, photosynthesis occurs in what's called the mesophyll. Ground tissue is made of chloroplast-rich parenchyma cells. If you remember parenchyma, those are the very thin-walled cells that are still flexible. They have large central vacuoles. They are involved in metabolism, which a photosynthesis would be part of, and in storage. So a lot of these cells are going to act as the source. If you remember translocation in the movement of organic compounds from the source to the sink. So here is a drawing of a cross section of a leaf that was done by a student from EP 10, I think, 10 or 11, I can't remember, third. So we have the bottom of the leaf here. How do I know it's the bottom? Because the stomata is here. You don't have stomata on the top part of a leaf. You only have it on the bottom. And you see the thin cuticle layer here and on top as well. So in most plants, mesophyll is going to be organized into two different layers. We have palisade mesophyll, which is directly beneath the upper epidermis. That's here, right? Cells of the palisade layer. You can tell the palisade layer because they're in columns. This is where most of the photosynthesis occurs. You can see here he's labeled even the chloroplasts, which I don't think are labeled properly, but that's okay. Now here's a cross-section SEM, a scanning electron microscope photograph. We have the upper epidermis here, and you can see all these nice little columns here. That's the palisade mesophyll number 2. They're loosely, they look packed tightly together in 1, maybe 2 layers. And there's air spaces between the walls. Beneath the palisade layer, remember this is where photosynthesis occurs. This is the second type of mesophyll called spongy mesophyll. Now it is called spongy because there's going to be, you can see many air spaces, little air pockets here. They're very loosely packed. And that is because the lower epidermis, number 5, this is where your stomata are going to be. So air is going to come in and go out through the space. So it's important that you have lots of air space here. So oxygen can go out, carbon dioxide can come in, and water can evaporate through the leaf, through these large air spaces. So once again, we've got upper epidermis, we've got palisade mesophyll, spongy mesophyll, lower epidermis. Not too complicated, hopefully. Now, the vascular tissue system is made of vascular bundles called veins. This going from, I'll just circle it, this is a vein right here. You can see again, the xylem is on the inside, phloem towards the outside. This xylem and phloem is continuous with the vascular system of the stem and the petiole. So it's just all connected, very much in the way that our arteries are connected as they go and move to arterioles. They branch off, they get smaller and smaller into capillaries, and then capillaries merge together to form venules. Venules merge together to form veins, which return blood to the heart. Very much kind of the same thing. So it's embedded, you can see it's embedded within, oop, didn't want that one, within the mesophyll, right? So we've got spongy mesophyll on the bottom, palisade mesophyll on the top, and then the vascular bundles or the veins, which are embedded in the middle. Now, I talked about venation earlier, feels like a year ago, when we were comparing monocots and dicots. So venation is just the arrangement of the veins in a leaf. Monocots have parallel venation. Dicots have what's called net venation. So parallel, all of the veins, all of the vascular bundles are going in the same direction. They're all parallel to each other. And net venation or branched, you can see that it branches off, and then even smaller branches here. Here is just one main vein per blade, and then you can see that it branches off on the sides there. And that, as I said, leaves play a huge role in identifying plants. Now, obviously, the main function of the leaf is that it is where photosynthesis occurs. The mesophyll cells can use light energy, carbon dioxide, and water to make carbohydrates. Not only does photosynthesis result in carbohydrates, but it also makes other organic compounds like amino acids and fats. The carbohydrates made in the leaf are used as energy or as building blocks for things like cellulose. The major limitation to photosynthesis is not enough water because of transpiration. 98% of water absorbed by corn's roots is lost by transpiration. It also cools the plant and speeds the transports of minerals through the xylem. Now, leaves are often adapted to maximize catching light. Obviously, if photosynthesis is the main function of plants, then capturing light is going to be a main concern for the evolution of plants. So leaves that develop in full sun are usually thicker, they have a smaller area per leaf, and they have more chloroplasts. So a lot of times, I should remember this actually, if you want to go buy new plants, if you find leaves that are really thick, like especially rubber plants, those are plants that need full sunlight. Shade leaf chloroplasts are arranged so that the shading of one chloroplast by another is minimized. So they actually do something called cytoplasmic streaming. I'll see if I can find a video on YouTube where you can search for it, where you actually see the chloroplasts like kind of squished to the outer edge of the cell so that they don't overlap each other. In a dry environment, plants can receive more light than they can use. So they often have structures that reduce the amount of light absorbed. Like you saw in the previous picture and in this one, they have hairs. I've never personally seen a hairy plant in person. Another option is for the majority of the plant to grow underground. It's like this. So that helps to prevent water loss. Now, this is how a stomata works. It's not actually, I mean, it's a pore made by guard cells. Okay, so you've got one guard cell on each side. And when the guard cells are full of water, they swell and they kind of pull apart. They look more like kidney beans and they form the pore. When like at nighttime, when the pores close, then water is going to leave and they're going to shrink and close the hole. Plants have to balance their need to open stomata to get carbon dioxide and release oxygen with preventing water loss. So we've got two guard cells. And you can see here, basically it works by transporting potassium in. So most plants, they have their stomata open during the day and closed at night because that's when the sun is shining and it can, and they regulate the opening and closing by controlling how much water is in the cells. So during the day, the epidermal cells pump potassium into the guard cell. Now this word pump has a very specific meaning. That means it's active transport, which means not transport, which means it uses energy. Because potassium goes into the guard cells, that means that water is going to follow by osmosis. That flooding of water into the guard cells make them swell and they bend apart to make a pore, which opens the stoma or stomata. So you can see here that the guard cells are swollen. That's why I said they look like a kidney bean. And then when there's not enough water or it's the nighttime, then potassium gets released. That means water follows. Sorry, I'm writing blue on blue. And the cells shrink. You can see the size of these cells versus the size of these cells. So again, potassium pumped out of the guard cells, waters leave, the cells shrink, and the stomata close. This is also regulated by the amount of water available. When there is a shortage of water, stomata are going to close to prevent any additional water loss. And that helps the plant survive until it rains again, which just did the other day, which was like amazing because my plants really needed water. Oh, the end.